What's up, kinfolk? It's RJ Young. I am not on a step mill. Consider hitting the like and subscribe button because I upload a video every single day. It's always college football related, sports related. We have a good time. Today, you're getting a third consecutive live stream from me. And that does not necessarily happen all that much. But you know what? When we are cooking toward the college football playoff, it happens more often than not. We do the Monday and Wednesday thing at 3 o'clock live. You can download that show on the RJ Young Show podcast, where there are no ads currently, so it's ad-free listening if that's what you're into. Also, yo dog, I did the college football playoff instant reaction show where I watched it along with you and reacted to it in real time. Some mistakes I want to correct in there that I want to address in this show. Also talk a little bit about how we are talking about BYU, how we are talking about the Big 12, how we are talking about Georgia, and which teams do we think can make it into the college football playoff that perhaps don't have an outside chance because, well, it's been done before. But I want to start this show by talking about some recruiting news, as Corey Foreman's father spoke with Greg Biggins over at 247 Sports. And while it has been interesting to watch recruiting in this era, it has been so interesting to watch Corey Foreman's recruiting in this era. Now, it is not as bombastic and laden with fireworks as Zach Evans' recruitment in 2020, but it is far and away one of the most exciting recruitments that we have had for the 2021 class. Starting with the knowledge that he decided to decommit from Clemson in April in the middle of quarantine in the midst of the pandemic, at a time when Ohio State was coming on really strong. LSU was showing out really greatly. Alabama looked like they were dead in the water, only to assume the number one spot by August. And on we go. Like, there's so much moving and shaking that has happened between the time that he decommitted and this time now as we head into December. Even as he was committed to Clemson, there are folks that have covered him in California, in Corona, at Centennial, that always thought that USC was going to be in the mix because it is SC. Because the brand name of USC still means quite a bit, not just to you and me, but to the kiddos, particularly the kiddos that grow up in Southern California. I know kiddos that go to Michigan, kiddos that go to Ohio State, kiddos that go to Arizona State, kiddos that go to Oklahoma, kiddos that go to Florida, kiddos that go to Texas, that still have some love for USC. And it has been an unlikely landing spot for some of the best talent around Southern California the last few years, even as you got to go back to 2016 for the last time that USC was contending with the big dogs in college football. Even so, Clay Helton has landed Chris Steele, 5-star corner. He has landed JT Daniels, even if he transferred, 5-star quarterback. He had Bryce Young in the boat before a late flip to Alabama, where he is the true freshman now. He's been able to land Brew McCoy after first having him in the boat, losing him in Texas, and then getting him back onto campus and playing wide receiver out there at SC. He's had Kyle Ford. He's continued to groom pretty good quarterbacks. Keaton Slovis was perhaps the third best quarterback on the depth chart, maybe the fourth best quarterback on the depth chart last year. And then JT Daniels blows out an ACL. Jack Sears transfers. Matt Fink is not their guy, except for that one time when he beat Utah somehow, some way in a remarkable game. And that's been the charmed life that Clay Helton has lived. Even going into this season, we didn't expect USC to really be a factor on the field, and yet they are 3-0 and barking at perhaps getting a berth into the playoff. One of those teams that's got an outside shot to get there. Even as they've had some last-second heroics against Arizona and Arizona State to start the season, they've only had one decisive win. That was against a Utah team that hadn't played football before that game. And now you're looking at SC, and you're looking at Corey Foreman perhaps being a linchpin for them. But what I thought was interesting is that Foreman and his family are expecting to take one last visit before his commitment date. His commitment date is January 2nd. In lieu of the All-American Bowl, they're going to have the All-American Showcase Show, which is where the kids are going to be able to announce where they're going to commit and sign for college. I've always loved that about the All-American Bowl. In between snaps of football, you get cuts to families, you get cuts to the kids who are going to announce they're going to Michigan, they're going to Oklahoma, they're going to SC, they're going to Florida. Adrian Peterson famously saying, I'm going to Oklahoma. Joe Mixon, I'm going to Oklahoma. Darian Green Warren, I'm going to Matter of fact, Mama, where are we going? then we going to Michigan. Like, I really love that stuff. And I love knowing that some of the kids feel some kind of way about being able to get there, right? Like, Dwight McGlothern really stuck out for me because he was so excited to say that he was going to LSU at the All-American Bowl. And that is where we will find out what Corey Foreman is going to do. Now, the Crystal Balls give about a 60% lead to SC, as I mentioned. But LSU and Georgia have both been in the mix in a tremendously large way, right? So much so that he has traveled to Baton Rouge, hung out with Mason Smith, who we feel is an LSU lean and a defensive tackle and a buddy of his. He's hung out with Garrett Nussmeier, who is the quarterback that's committed to that 2021 class. He's hung out with Rajon Davis. And if they're able to add Foreman and Mason Smith to an already ridiculously awesome class, they have a chance to finish as the number one class in recruiting. It might be the only good thing we get to say about LSU in 2020, as they've been slapped with self-reported violations. They have an ongoing sexual assault scandal on their campus, and they suck on the football field. It has not been fun to be an LSU fan. And while I've been dunking on LSU fans basically for the last 4 months because I told them they were going to catch 5 losses even before the season started, even I'm getting a little bit tired of it because I don't want you to be in this sort of trouble. I don't want anybody to have to deal with this sort of trouble. I also want to see your program get cleaned up, and I would love for Ed Orgeron to go front and center on that. But is that going to stop a Corey Foreman, a Tristan Lay, a Mason Smith from committing there? These are all good questions. The way that Georgia's been recruiting probably has the most to do with why they are ranked inside the top 10 in the college football playoff. They've won 2 of the last 3 recruiting national championships, finishing atop the 247 Sports Composite rankings. And we understand what kind of talent is on display for Kirby Smart. But Kirby Smart is venturing into this category that is littered with the dead bodies of James Franklin, of Jim Harbaugh, and of Tom Herman, and that you're doing the most, or you're doing the least with the most. You ought to be winning national championships with the caliber of player that you've had come through there. You've had Kearis Jackson alongside George Pickens. You've also had Zamir White and James Cook and DeAndre Swift and Nick Chubb and Sonny Michel. You've also had Jake Fromm and Jacob Eason and Justin Fields, who we will never, ever, ever let you forget you had. You've also had J.R. Reed, who was a Paycom Jim Thorpe Award finalist and my pick to win it last year. You've had Richard LeCount. You've had Eric Stokes. You've had monsters in the middle. Monty Rice is a dude you groomed into being an outstanding player. And yet you're not going to play for an SEC championship, let alone for a college football playoff national championship. Now there's Corey Foreman. And where is he going to take his last visit before he takes the plunge? Clemson. Going to give them one last opportunity to impress he and his family. And we know what Brent Venables' defensive line has done. We know what Brent Venables' defensive line is capable of. We also know that they put dudes into the league, and that was where he's first committed. But the dark horse coming on strong here seems to be Arizona State. Herm Edwards, Antonio Pierce, Marvin Lewis, all dudes doing the most to recruit this kiddo out of LA, which is to say, they are not necessarily moved by your blue blood status or by your status of having played in a college football playoff or in a national championship, as proof with USC. But they also want to know that you're going to develop him into the kind of kid that can play at the next level. Herm Edwards, Marvin Lewis, Antonio Pierce have tremendous NFL pedigree that nobody's going to argue with. And they were right there in that game against USC. They probably should have won that game, if not for some real late heroics from Drake London and Keaton Slovis in the final drive of the game. I would be terrified of Arizona State next year if I'm USC or anybody else in the Pac-12 South, because I think they could be that good. And if you get to add a guy like Corey Foreman, you get to vault into the conversation to win the Pac-12 championship and make the college football playoff, because now we're respecting your roster as much as anything else. So let's keep an eye on what Corey Foreman is doing and how he feels going into his January 2nd announcement. With that, let's check the chat. Warthog 2022, what's good, brother? Yeah, man's been a long-time friend of the channel. Like, he remembers the Giving Tree. And if you don't know what the Giving Tree is, y'all need to get on the good foot with that, right? Because, like, Warthog was over here giving me hell, like, when there were less than 1,000 subscribers on this channel. 300 subscribers to this channel, and Warthog would be in every comment, giving me the business, and also shooing me forward before I really knew what I was doing here, Warthog was like, yeah, enough about the books, dog. Tell me about Baker Mayfield. I love that dude. I appreciate you for joining up on the channel, man. Well, that's what's up. Corey Carhoff is in here. I appreciate that. He said, yeah, thought it was about time since I'm an OG follower. LOL. Let's see. Corey Carhoff said, can't justify Georgia over Miami and Indiana. Sorry. We're going to get into that here in just a little bit. I'm with you on that, though. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you as well. Be a few treats on the channel tomorrow, one of which I will tell you about right now. I think I'm going to let go this tremendously long upload from the 2019 Big 12 Media Days, where I talked with Cree Humphrey, Kenneth Murray Jr., and CeeDee Lamb ahead of the 2019 season. It's really cool, just to take a look back at that. Probably going to drop that tomorrow night around Thanksgiving as a special treat for everybody who's going to come through. Let's see. Who else is in here? Somebody says terrible, LAMO. Ayo, they suck. Oh yeah, LSU. That's who we talk about. Damn not Saban. All right, so let's talk about damn not Saban. So Nick Saban tested positive for the virus earlier today, or at least revealed that positive test earlier today. PCR test. It is not a false negative like the one that happened ahead of the game against Georgia. Now, Peter Burns had a really great joke that I'm going to relate to you, which is, that somebody's going to call in the Feinbaum show, which is on about right now, to say that, Nick Saban had that false positive narrative cooked up so that he would have his team ready for it, if he ever did test positive, which they're probably not actually joking. They're probably telling you what they really feel, which is even more wild and one of the reasons that we love SEC football as much as anything else. Fans are just out there crazy. But that also means Steve Sarkisian really is going to have to assume the controls against Auburn in the Iron Bowl this Saturday. Now, that's not the big deal that it would have been against the Georgia team, because we expected that Georgia team to be really good. They weren't. And we expected this Auburn team to be really bad. They still might be. It's also a way different Alabama team than the one that Auburn beat last year, to say nothing of how much different the Auburn team is that beat them last year is this year. The only things that people remember, right, on the surface is Mac Jones, is Bo Nix, right? You remember that you had Derek Brown in the middle. You remember Kevin Steele's defense. You remember Mac Jones throwing those 2 pick sixes, one of which was really not his fault. And you also remember Auburn being able to move the football on the ground against Alabama. It's Pete Golden's first year. He caught a whole bunch of hell for that, and I understand. But what people tend to forget is just how big a deal it was to have Derek Brown in the middle of that defense for Auburn, along with Big Cat Bryant, and how they've gotten so much smaller in the front 7 this year. It's going to be much harder for you to bully the Alabama offensive line this year. It's also easy to forget Alabama's defense was down 4 starters in their front 7. You also didn't really have much in the way of the defensive tackle development. You're still waiting on some guys to grow up. You're having to play Shane Lee and Christian Williams in the middle, right? In a way that you don't really want to have to do that. They're true freshmen. You wanted to have Dylan Moses out there. You would love to have had Terrell Lewis just be completely healthy and being able to play outside linebacker as opposed to him moving inside. You also need to take into account Trayvon Diggs is gone, right? But you still got Pat Surtain Jr., and he's cold-blooded, like Charlie Murphy. Cold-blooded. By the way, boycott Dave Chappelle. He said that, not me. You should go check that out. Go check out the Dave Chappelle sketch. It's about 18 minutes. It's not a sketch. It's a bit. It's 18 minutes. It's a set. You should go check that out. It's worth your time. But on to Alabama. Steve Sarkisian is also in a really great spot here, because as a former head coach at Washington and USC, we know that he has those head coaching chops. He's also proven himself as an offensive coordinator here in the last few years. But think about how he has been a developer of quarterbacks here of late, and why that probably matters just as much for them winning a national championship, or the opportunity for them to win a national championship this year, as much as him perhaps being a Power 5 head coach at the spot that he wants to be at next year. Because think about quarterback development, right? He has helped develop Tua Tagovailoa. He's developed Mac Jones from a 3-star recruit into a front runner for the Heisman Trophy. Other guys that have been developing outstanding quarterbacks, Lincoln Riley, right? Head coach. Ryan Day, head coach. mean, the only guy that's probably not on that list is Dabo Swinney with Trevor Lawrence and Deshaun Watson. Also, though, head coach, right? I think we're going to see Steve Sarkisian, like Lane Kiffin, head coach, end up being a head coach. It's about when does he want to take that job and what job he wants to take. I don't think the South Carolina job is the one you want to take if you are Steve Sarkisian. I think you are sitting in the Kirby Smart catbird seat of I'm going to wait for the perfect job to come open for me, and then that's what I'm going to do. Because there's a whole hell of a lot worse jobs than being the offensive coordinator at Alabama, where you got toys like Najee Harris. You got toys like Devontae Smith and John Mechie and Slade Bolden. And for a time, what many people thought was the best player in all of college football in Jalen Waddle. And then you get to replenish all of that, right? They got dudes coming in. They got dudes on the depth chart. Trey Sanders is a dude. Brian Robinson is a dude. I mean, Ja'Cory Brooks is a dude. Ajay Hall is a dude. Like, it's so much fun to be the coordinator at Alabama right now because you also are recruiting one of the best offensive lines, like perhaps in history. Think about that. They are awesome on the offensive line right now. Terrence Ferguson. That's the worst dude on the offensive line. You got the Brockemeyer twins. You've also got outstanding tackle play. J.C. Latham, Tommy Brockemeyer. James Brockemeyer is considered the best center in America. I think we're going to be looking at that, dog. I think that's going to be what it is. I think a big part of what we are experiencing with Alabama is just how good the organization is for what Nick Saban has done and what he's able to do. Because they've been institutionally great in a way that we just don't really give a lot of credit to because we expect that engine to just run. Think about it this way. Nick Saban was the only person to test positive in the entire program at Alabama this week. The only one. They have lost 0 games to them testing positive on a campus where it's just the thing to test positive. Like, they are not actually quarantining. They are not actually, like, wearing the mask in the way they're supposed to. Like, I read all these news stories about how Alabama, the University of Alabama, is having these cases just spike and skyrocket. And I keep thinking, how does this not get to the team? And they've been just really disciplined about it, which is a hallmark of Nick Saban, right? It's a hallmark of his team. His perma-grimace on the sideline, his folded arms on the sideline. They are about discipline. They are about tightened up, right? They want to stay tightened up. So much so that when you lose to Tagovailoa to a season-ending injury, you can bring in a 3-star recruit like Mac Jones, and you can still torch people like Auburn. I don't think this game against Auburn is going to be close. I never thought it was going to be close. I don't think it gets closer because Nick Saban's not on the sideline. I think, if anything, it's going to be a little tighter for the team because now they have something to play for other than the Iron Bowl. They get to play for a coach who has not missed a game since he has been the head coach at Alabama, and probably hasn't missed a game in the 21st century as an assistant or head coach, just period. It's also been him since 2007 there, which is to say Tommy Tuberville is a United States senator right now, as wild as that is to imagine. He actually beat Nick Saban at Auburn as a head coach. Like, that's how long ago it was when we weren't actually thinking about who Nick Saban is and how great he is at being himself and what he has built at Alabama. As much noise as we talk about Alabama football, as much noise as we talk about what we want the SEC to be and the SEC bias, I have nothing but respect for what Nick Saban has built on the football side of things. And I have tremendous respect for all the kids that managed to make it through that program because I could not take that sort of chewing every day for 4 years. It just could not be me. Shout out Sean Farbs. Let me know how to say it in the chat there, Sean. I appreciate you, dog. He says, keep it going, bro. I plan to. Wait a second. That news might have broken while I was on the show. Yep, Oklahoma versus West Virginia has been postponed. This news is dropping while I am on the show. Saturday's game will be rescheduled for December 12th due to COVID issues within the Sooners program. This is news to me. Make sure that I get this while we are going on air. So the upshot is here. The Big 12 announced Saturday's game between Oklahoma and West Virginia has been postponed until December 12th. The Sooners said Wednesday they have temporarily paused team activities, quote, due to recent positive COVID-19 tests and contact tracing. West Virginia Athletic Director Shane Lyons commented on the situation, saying, "I am disappointed for both teams who have worked extremely hard in their preparation for this weekend's game. We will now look forward to honoring our seniors and hosting the Sooners on December 12th. That game was supposed to be in Morgantown, West Virginia, and there's all sorts of, implications from that cancellation. Among them is Oklahoma's spot in the college football playoff. Brian Graves, thank you for correcting me. It's not Christian Williams for Alabama. It's Christian Harris for Alabama. Also, check out Brian's channel. He does really great work, and I enjoy him. So, Oklahoma versus West Virginia basically rules out the possibility, I think, of Oklahoma putting together a consistent resume for the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, which is a thing that I want to get into. But if that game that is rescheduled on December 12th gets played, they also have an opportunity to be one of the last regular season games of note being played on a weekend where you might be able to influence the College Football Playoff Selection Committee, which really gets us right into a great spot where we get to talk about what is likely to happen outside the top 10. Because if you paid attention to the rankings last night, you'll see there are some undefeated teams and there are some good teams ranked between that 10 and 20 spot. And the reason that I wanted to talk about this as an angle is because in 2014, Ohio State started out as the number 16th ranked team in the playoff rankings initially. Now, they were a 6-1 squad. Oklahoma is obviously a 6-2 squad. But I believe that if you're a one-loss team or you don't have any losses on the resume and you're just starting your season like a USC, right? Or even a Coastal Carolina or a BYU, you have an opportunity here to really make a name for yourself. If anybody stands to gain something from Oklahoma's game versus West Virginia being postponed, it might actually be BYU, provided BYU is able to get a game scheduled between now and their next one against San Diego State on December 12th. Because we heard from Gary Barta last night, who is the Iowa State athletic director and the chairman for the selection committee for the playoff rankings. And he basically said, we need their schedule to be a little bit stronger. The Boise State team that they beat that was ranked inside the AP top 25 was also down with COVID issues. So they didn't get a full-strength Boise State team, and that is the toughest team that they played on their schedule. And while Zach Wilson and the boys might actually want to go out and play somebody, it's very clear to us that their administration does not. Kalani Sitake was really getting incensed in front of Reese Davis on the Playoff Rankings show about the idea that BYU was running from Washington. I tend to believe that they were running from Washington because whoever is making the schedule is running from Washington. Doesn't really matter whether or not your football team wanted to play Washington, because if you leave it up to the kids, they would have not just played Washington, they'd play Alabama, they'd play Ohio State, they'd play Notre Dame, and they'd play Clemson. That's how the kids would schedule themselves. It's the adults who want to make sure they make, one, some money, and two, play games they can win. That makes sure that that Washington game does not happen. Whether or not you want to hide behind the term protocol or not, right? I believe in protocol, and I want you to follow it. But make that the issue. Say that you don't want to follow the Pac-12 protocol. Don't say that we didn't like the way that the game was being structured. No, dog. Just go up there to Seattle and get your head kicked in or kick in ahead. Because when you say anytime, any place, anywhere, that's exactly what that means. It means travel to Seattle and play Washington. That's what that means. You're also trying to push a Heisman candidate in front of us. You're trying to tell us that Zach Wilson deserves to be among the best players, not just the best quarterbacks, the best players in all of college football, and I can't see it with the schedule you played. Like, you got Western Kentucky and North Alabama and Navy on your schedule, and that's how you're trying to tell us that this goes for you. You're trying to tell us that that scheduling matters, and it doesn't. Because if that mattered, we'd be talking about Coastal Carolina. We'd be talking about Marshall. We'd be talking about Cincinnati. We're talking about BYU because there are a number of people that sincerely want BYU to be considered for one of these playoff spots and also believes that BYU is misranked at number 14 and that they ought to be a top 10 team, especially when you take into account that Georgia's number 9 as a 2-loss team. But just for the giggles, dog, I'm going to pull up what BYU's schedule is and go game by game here. because I think all of this ought to matter, and I think all of this ought to play into how we talk about that team, who is 9-0, right? They are 9-0. I want to stress that. I get that. I also get that when you ain't played nobody, it's easy to say that you are 9-0. It's easy to say, hey, we dropped 66 on an FCS team. Like we care. Like I don't care about you playing North Alabama. So the first team they played, obviously Navy. Navy had not tackled anybody at all, even each other, before that game started. And they're trying to tell us that, that game ought to mean something to the rest of us. Make sure I get the score correct of that game. Trying to make sure I get that score correct. Hold up. Come on now. Thought I could talk through this, but apparently I cannot. Make sure I pull this thing up. Go to FBS schedule right quick. Nah, just go to BYUCougars.com. There we go. So they got the game postponed against Army. They play Navy. They beat Navy 55-3. Then they play Troy, beat them 48-7. Then they play La Tech, beat them 45-14. All three teams that we don't care about when we're talking about the college football playoff. Homecoming is UTSA, and they get a game from the Roadrunners that they win 27-20 in Provo. They beat Houston 43-26. Decent team, not a great team. Texas State 52-14. Western Kentucky 41-10. Boise State 51-17. And now North Alabama 66-14. So your best two wins are Houston, Boise State, or UTSA, depending on how you want to define that. I can't get behind that, but I see how you can. And I think we have an opportunity here. If BYU is able to schedule one of these teams that lost a game that is ready to go, like, say, Tulsa, perhaps, right? They need a game. Or Cincinnati, perhaps, because they lost the game against Temple this weekend. Maybe we're talking about something. Maybe we're on to something that's worthwhile. But right now, I need them to play a good Pac-12 team, or a good American team, or a good whomever, because it seems like American and Pac-12 are the only ways you got to go, because the Big 12 is playing a conference schedule, SEC is playing a conference schedule, ACC is playing a conference schedule, Big 10 is playing a conference schedule. You really got to go and see if you can get Washington, if you can get Oregon, you can get USC, you can get Arizona State. You want to get one of these teams that's ranked inside the college football playoff, though. And knowing that Tulsa's there at 25 and has an opportunity, I think you really need to think about that and give that your time. Let me see. Check the chat. Mike Farino coming in with the $5 super chat. I had always been against expanding the playoffs, but after last night, I'm all for it. It would either confirm SEC bias is valid or destroy it. I think SEC bias is valid. I just also want to see the playoff expanded. The reason I think that it is valid is because North Dakota State and James Madison always end up there, like in the semifinals in the national championship game. No, everybody knows in FCS that North Dakota State is sunning people. They're the number one ranked team. They also end up with the number one seed. Nobody argues because it's a 2014 playoff. San Diego has been whooping behind in the Pioneer League for years. They win that conference. They get the automatic bid to the playoffs, and they get stomped out in the second round. I'm with that because that means you lost, right? That's what I'm here for. I want to know that every team that's undefeated got an opportunity to play for a national championship. I don't want to hand somebody a banner because they didn't play any good football teams, because the Zach Wilsons of the world cannot make your schedule, right? I want that to happen. That's why I want the playoff expanded. I do think that the SEC teams are still going to make it into the Final Four. They're still going to play for national championships, but I want to see every team that is undefeated get the same opportunity to get skull dragged by Bama, whether or not that's Coastal Carolina or Marshall or Cincy or BYU or SC. I want you to be able to play until somebody beats you, because that's American, right? That's where I live. If you didn't beat me, I'm undefeated. I'm the national champ. Well, you didn't play nobody. I asked to play somebody. You won't let me. That's what expanding the playoff does. It puts to rest all the arguments about who's good and who's not, because you got to settle it on a football field. Check the chat, see what else we got going on here. Trying to make sure I didn't miss any super chats. Shout out Cloud Woo, who is joining the community. I appreciate that. With the badge there. Let's see what else we got in here. If you are a member to the community, the badge shows up, and that makes it easier for me to spot your question in the chat. Let's see. What's we got in here? Trying to make sure. My man from Russia, he's talking to Matthew. All right, cool. Doc Winston, Boogie. What you got, Doc? He says BYU had 6 Power 5 teams on its original schedule before the Pac-12, BYU, and ACC canceled. I get that. I still want you to try to schedule another team inside the Pac-12 now that they have said we will take your out of conference scheduling if you submit to the protocols. And, they had that on the table with Washington. They chose not to play Washington. You got to take what you can get at this point if you want to be into the playoff. If you don't, you want to play a Holiday Bowl and claim a national championship, that's on you. My man from Russia. Yo, dog, you're going to have to put your name in there because I can't pronounce Cyrillic. I can't do it. So, hey, RJ, do you think Ohio State will make the championship finals or will they end up like last year? Okay, so the thing about Ohio State that is bothering me presently is they got a secondary like Oklahoma secondary in 2018. I did not expect that to be the case. When Ohio State announced that Kerry Combs was not only returning to coach the secondary at Ohio State, but to be the defensive coordinator, I was stoked because it felt like they were not going to have any drop-off after losing Jeff Hafley to a head coaching gig at Boston College. But that's exactly what has happened. Kerry Combs has been trying to run Jeff Hafley's scheme and Jeff Hafley's system. The problem with that is you can't really fix a car that you didn't help build. You got to take some time to learn how that car was put together so that you can take it apart and you can put it back together. Kerry Combs ain't got that kind of time, right? Just because you had 50-plus practices and played just 4 games does not mean that you've been able to accurately diagnose what's wrong with your team because you haven't played out other teams to see what those deficiencies are. Different teams play you differently than you're going to play yourself. You play your offense. That ain't the sort of offense you're going to face all the time. Those aren't the kind of players you're going to face all the time. You would think having Garrett Wilson, Chris Olave, Master Teague, Trey Sermon, and the like on a field to go against would help you. But perhaps it's not that those guys are so good. It's that perhaps the secondary is just not that good. And when you look at Sevyn Banks, you look at Marcus Hooker, and you look at Shaun Wade, you want to believe that you could drop those dudes out there and you could play good football. But right now, they got to figure out whether or not they're a 5 DB team or a 4 DB team, whether or not they want to run cover 2 or they want to run cover 3. They want to be a cover 3 team, but they're getting cooked. Like Peyton Hernington was hurting Pete Werner, was hurting Baron Browning. You lining David Ellis up on a linebacker who's a wide receiver, you're going to get destroyed. You got to fix that. So if they get into the playoff and they got to outscore people and they can't stop anybody, kiss it goodbye. That's how Oklahoma lives, right? That's what's been wild is I'm seeing more Ohio State football looking like Oklahoma 2019, 2018, 2017. You can score 1 million points and you can put up 1 million yards. You can't stop anybody. And when you get to the playoff, you get exposed, dog, because every offense you place in the playoff is good. And supposedly, every defense you play is at least mediocre to good. Like LSU might have had the worst defense since Florida State to win a national championship. Whereas Clemson in 2018 rode its defense to a national championship. And that's how you would want to do it. Now, even Nick Saban would say you can't win national championships on defense alone anymore. But that is to say, I would much rather have an offense that could put up 35 to 40 with a defense that can stop you from scoring 28 than I would like to have an offense that can put up 50 and a defense that can't stop you from scoring 40, because now we're a 3 and out away from not only losing this game, but losing it big, right? We're a pick 6 away from this game becoming a 2-score, 3-score game when we can't stop anybody. Think about it this way. If Shaun Wade does not pick off Michael Penix and return that to the house, it's a tie ball game going into overtime. That's how thin the margins are for Ohio State right now. You got to get wider than that against Indiana. I don't care that Indiana is a top 10 team. You're supposed to be the top 10 team like that by 3 touchdowns. Like that's what the spread was going into the game. Now we're actually having to have discussions about, is Latham Ransom the answer? Is Josh Proctor the answer at free safety? Can you run 3 linebackers out there? These are all questions I expected Ohio State to have answered before the season started. And now they're really having to come up with answers for those things as they face Illinois, as they face Penn State, as they face Michigan, who aren't good. So you're not going to get tested. And that might be the reason why you might ask questions to Justin Fields. Who was he played against, right? The argument now is that his first read is always open. He's good because his first read is always open. I don't believe that, but I see where the argument comes from because it's true, right? If your first read is always open, you ought to be a great quarterback. And you can see that from the completion percentage before the Indiana game. He plays a good defense, 3 interceptions, okay? He's having to pull off. He's having to take off. He's getting hit in the head, missed targeting calls. All these things need to be cleaned up, both on the offensive side and the defensive side. So that's what I am most concerned about for Ohio State going forward. Let me see. Looking more at this. See what else we got in here. Boost Mode 22, new member to the chat. What's going on, dog? RJ, I took your advice and watched Bedlam. Saw your students slap the Cowboys. Fun game to watch, though. Stinks the game. May not be a game this year. Glad I can finally support you and your progress. Appreciate that, dog. Like, I wanted the game to be meaningful for some time. Like, that's the one thing that I can say about OU Texas. Both teams show up to play, right? Both teams going to get good, and they're going to get their blows in. Like, it's 4 overtimes this year, right? It's been awesome to watch the last few years. I want Michigan to be competitive, and maybe that triple overtime win against Rutgers is the push they needed. Golly. Carrie Harrell, $5 super chat, says, hey, RJ, have you changed your mind about Bama's defense since Ole Miss? Keep grinding like the Goku on your projects. Appreciate that, dog. God bless. So, my man in Russia said my name is Nikolai. I appreciate that, Nikolai. That's what I'm going to go with. But to answer your question, Carrie, I have, because they've tightened up, like I was saying earlier about Nick Saban. They're a tight program. He's going to tighten it up. And I felt like after the Ole Miss game, Nick Saban probably went back to coaching DBs for a week. Probably said, no, I got this, Carl. You take the week off. Go hold this clipboard. I got this. Pete, I'm running the D-line drills today. Like, I feel like all that. Freddie, get out the way. I'm running team period for Pete Golden today. Everybody's going to get this word today because I'm tired of this. Nah, man, because, like, it's also about consistency, right? It's consistency and having veteran play. I think they're getting to a point to where I expect them to be in a normal year in October, right? Which in this year, fine. If everybody's just gearing up for the college football playoff run to come, I'm with that. But it's going to be a rocky 6 weeks. But they're headed in the right direction. Certainly, if anything, I didn't come off thinking that Alabama's defense was bad, though they did get torched. I came off thinking Ole Miss is really good. And they're not really good. They're good, though. Like, if I'm making the power rankings, they're probably 5 or 6 right now. You know, but just behind like a Georgia. Because A&M is there, Florida is there, right? Who else you going to put up there? It's a good football team. Let's see what else got in here. Somebody giving Freifogel love in here. Going to be a Biletnikoff Award finalist, probably. I know he's going to make a semifinalist list. Alex Renteria says, do you think LSU will get a severe penalty from the NCAA, like losing institutional control? Lots of their sports have been doing sketchy things. It's a good point because, like, going back to last year, Will Wade had his phone line tapped by the feds. And they still let that man keep his job as LSU men's basketball coach. Could not be me. Anytime the feds is involved in what I'm doing, I got to stop doing that. And I got to stop being associated with the person who they are investigating, but not LSU. Okay. All right. You also had Odell Beckham Jr. later that year flipping out a grip, slapping it in them hands, said, get this bounty money for winning this national championship. Wouldn't have been me. I wouldn't have been that foolish, but he did. So he got the 2-year ban from the campus and the facilities. All right. Now you got the self-reported violations along with the headline for me. Vidal Alexander's daddy taking 180 G's from a booster who stole that money, stole that money from a hospital. That's a bad look. That's all the way around bad look. Like, the Venn diagram is everybody in there. It's a whole bad look. Oh, whole bad look. Now, add to that, you sorry on the football field. You're trash on the football field, particularly defensively. In a year where everybody was gassing up Bo Pelini. We about to be back on one. We're going back to running the 4-3. We about to get in everybody's behind once again. We're going to tighten up this defense that got a little bit loose last year on Dave Veranda. We're going to run it back like hell. Like hell. Yeah. Y'all going to run it back like Goku get ran back. Goku show up after being all in his bag and then get destroyed. Telling y'all, man. LSU think they Broly when they really just Goku about to get smashed. That's what they are, right? Need to get a little more Vegeta back up in here, right here. You need to get a little bit more Vegeta. God, my goodness. I'm about to start calling y'all Kakarot. LSU. Fake. Anyway, all to say, I think that they could get the lack of institutional control, but I don't think they are, because I don't think we're ever going to see something like a death penalty ever again because of what it did to SMU and how bad the NCAA missed the television revenue from not having one of its best college football teams on television. It's a big deal. It's also going to be a thing that I think the SEC would fight because they know how much money LSU brings in. So I don't see it getting that badly or that bad, but the loss of scholarships, maybe the loss of a coaching position, right? Maybe a loss in recruiting budget, that would severely hurt LSU. There's lots of things that you could do to squeeze them. But I don't think the lack of institutional control is going to be one of them. It's a good question, though, Alex. I appreciate the question. Trying to make sure that I get to the badges. See. LSU stealing one from Arkansas is pain. Yeah, man, the boot was about to come home to Fayetteville. It's about to come home for real. Do you think Combs' defense is getting stale, like how Urban Meyer offense was? No, I don't think, because it's not his defense. It's not his defense, right? It's Jeff Hafley's defense. Remember, Ohio State fans were very loud about what Greg Schiano and Alex Wrench had done to their defense. Bring in Jeff Hafley. He fixes everything. They have the number one pass defense in the country. But Jeff Hafley goes away. Bring in Kerry Combs, who's supposed to run the same defense that got fixed, and it's getting torched. Maybe it's just that Jeff Hafley's good. How about that? How about Jeff Hafley was severely underrated, and that's saying a lot, as he's probably the second best defense coordinator in college football last year, like behind Brent Venables. And yet he still managed to be underrated when we take a look at what the product is like that Ohio State put on the field in the secondary. Wild. Let's see. Should Herman be gone? Man, look. He beats Iowa State. They get back to, I didn't even think about that. All right, so this is actually a point that led me to another point. Now that OU West Virginia is off, Texas has an opportunity, along with Iowa State, to get into the Big 12 championship game. They might actually need to play that game for all the marbles against West Virginia on December 12th to get into the Big 12 championship game. So Texas-Iowa State is at 11 a.m. this week. It was the biggest game on the calendar for the Big 12 this week, and I'm here for it. Okay. Also means, right, that, my God, we're looking at, if Texas beat Iowa State falls to 6-3, but 5-2 or 6-2 in the conference, and Texas is on par with them, while Oklahoma is 6-2 already in the conference and was looking to assert some control in the race for the Big 12. So if Tom Herman's able to beat Iowa State and basically help ensure that Texas still has an opportunity to get to the Big 12 championship game, 100% they're keeping Tom Herman. He doesn't make the Big 12 championship game, I could see them cutting ties. The way that I saw South Carolina say enough with South Carolina, because South Carolina's expectations are not that of Texas's expectations. Like, they're just not. So that's going to be wild interested. Goodness me. My goodness. Like, apparently, just got a source that's reached out to me. Because Oklahoma had all of those fans in the stands, we had tremendous COVID outbreak following the game. Okay, that's wow. Because I was watching that game going, why are we having so many people at these games? Let's not have so many people at these games. Okay, I just got the Big 12's announcement. In accordance with the Big 12 Conference Football Game Interruption Guidelines, Oklahoma at West Virginia game scheduled for November 28 has been postponed. The game will be rescheduled on December 12th. The time and television designation will be announced when available. Golly. Man, I think that game was supposed to be on ABC as well. I think that was a tremendously big game for Oklahoma. BC, interesting to see what game get flexed into that Saturday night spot. Man, everybody would love to see the Iron Bowl move to that. Also, some news that I did not address on this show, but has been addressed by me on Twitter. Rashad Bateman decided that he was going to opt out at Minnesota. Man, opt out to begin with when they didn't think it was going to have no season. Opt back in, play 5 games, opt back out. Now, Minnesota's 2-3, and if they're 5-0, we're not asking that question anymore. But man said, after further dialogue with Coach Fleck and my family, we decided that after this most recent COVID-19 outbreak and the cancellation of this weekend's game, that it made the most sense to begin to focus on the next stage of my career. Minnesota has changed me forever, and the lessons I learned in the row the boat culture will stay with me for the rest of my life. There is no better coach to play for in the nation than Coach Fleck, and I appreciate everything he has done for me. I can't thank my coaches enough for always supporting me and for always pushing me to change. What is that? Change my best each day. Okay. With that being said, I am excited for everything I can and will do to be a positive influence in this community that has welcomed me with open arms. None of it goes unnoticed. I know I have a ton to be thankful for, and I wish everyone a happy and healthy Thanksgiving holiday. Well, that's that. Goodness me. Man, it says, again positive. Lol, he's catching a COVID like chlamydia. You're cutting me. Okay, that's what we're doing. How about this Texas wins over Iowa State but loses to Kansas right before the conference championship? That would suck. I don't think it's possible, but that would suck. Let me see what else we got in here. Once Jimbo beats Saban, then A&M can get love. Sure. But y'all got stomped by Alabama this year. That's what it is. Okay. Appreciate that, Doc. You got to that before I did. See what else. I'm trying to see what other questions we got in here that I can address here on the RJ Young Show podcast, where we live stream at 3 o'clock on Mondays and Wednesdays. And apparently during the college football playoff rankings show. Lots of statements, no question marks. Yes, I talked about the game getting postponed, Patrick. Is there a program that is trash right now that will be dominating in 5 years due to NIL? Georgia Tech really is sleeping giant, in my opinion, just because of being in the ATL middle, or in the middle of the ATL. Yeah, but Georgia's right there. So is Clemson. That's the reason Georgia Tech can't recruit. Georgia's there. Clemson's there. Tennessee ain't that far away. It's in Knoxville. UNC is down the road. They all have charismatic coaches with the exception of Jeremy Pruitt, right? Mac Brown knows how to be charismatic and recruit. Kirby Smart still knows how to be charismatic and recruit. Dabo is charismatic and recruits. They are also doing the most with NIL, especially like, this is interesting because Clemson is actually not pushing that as hard as I think they should be. Tennessee isn't either. Georgia, I think, is going to follow the money because Georgia is not going to turn down nothing but they collar when it comes to kiddos. And if the kiddo wants the NIL package, they're going to come up with the NIL package. I think Georgia Tech is always going to be difficult for those reasons, but also because it's an engineering school. Like, you got to have really good, not really good, but you got to have good grades to get into Georgia Tech. Like, you got to have good grades to get into Notre Dame, Northwestern, or Stanford. That's where Georgia Tech lives. That's why it's difficult to recruit to Georgia Tech. I mean, hey, you don't necessarily go to Georgia Tech to play football. I mean, or I should say, you don't go to Georgia Tech to play in the NFL. Calvin Johnson's the last dude I can really think of that went to Georgia Tech and we all knew was going to the NFL. Whereas you go to Georgia, we know what it is. At UNC even, we know what it is, right? Clemson, we know what it is. Tennessee, we know what it is. Georgia Tech, not so much, dog. Not so much. You also have to remember that same middle of ATL area, that's where one Kyle Hamilton came out of. You know where Kyle Hamilton plays football? Notre Dame. So even among teams that you should be recruiting with and beat out, you're losing to. That's the reason I don't see it happening for Georgia Tech. Let's see. With Burton's commit, do you think EE shies away from OSU this year? No, I don't think Emeka Egbuka is going to flinch because of a wide receiver commit in 2022. That ain't how those work. That only works for quarterbacks because there's only one quarterback on the field at a time. You can run G. Scott, Julian Fleming, Jackson Smith, and Jigba on the same play. Hell, you can put them in the same formation. You can put them out there at trips, right? And run Chris Olave to the left side. Like, you can do that. It's fine. Who do you like to see OU play in a bowl game? SC, LSU? Georgia. I know A&M is probably going to get that spot, but Georgia. Let's see what we got. Is the playoff committee going to put Auburn top 4 if they somehow win out? No, they're not. Hey, RJ, I'm thinking about starting a podcast. What advice do you have? Make a schedule and be consistent. Do that schedule. Let's see. Can A&M beat Alabama in the rematch this year's playoff? No, because A&M's not going to get into the playoff. Let's see. What's we got in here? Trying to see. RJ, what are the chances of getting Joel Klatt on here? Dude, it'd be fun. You know how much we like the Joel Klatt, man. You know we a big fan here. I mean, we had him on the channel one time. We did. And it was fun. I had him on my radio show that one time. It was fun. All right, as we get out of here, I want to talk just a little bit about one of my favorite subjects and a short king. A short king who most folks want to give so much hell to. But I, myself, understand the man. Understand what it means to be a short king. Understand how y'all vertically just disingenuous and mean folks can be. Okay? The vertical libel, like the vertical arrogance that we inspire out of you folks, is second to none. So my man Brendan Radley Hiles goes by Bookie. Wears the 44. Plays slot corner, nickel safety for the Oklahoma Sooners. Catches a lot of hell. Because he picks up personal foul penalty every now and again, an unsportsmanlike conduct penalty. OU fans love to rip this man on the Twitters. And so does media. But let me tell you what Lincoln Riley had to say about this. Because he was asked about the unsportsmanlike conduct penalties when there's really only one. He was from Bookie over the weekend in Bedlam. To which he answered the unsportsmanlike conduct bit, and then he said, I will say, real quick, too, I will say on that last question, because I know a lot's been made of it. And I think I said this the other day, and I don't think it got written about any. I know Bookie's taken some grief, and there's no question there are things he's got to do better. I would also say, too, and hopefully you guys will choose to write this as well, I don't know that we have a bigger team player on this team than that guy. I mean, that guy is the most for his teammates. Staying late with young guys, most energetic, helping coach up young guys. I mean, he's just bringing it more to this he brings more to this than what the people on the outside realize. So, while there's absolutely things he's got to correct and do better, I love having that kid here. He makes us better all the time. And we will be a worse program the day that he's not here. Lincoln Riley, talking about Brendan Radley Hiles, a.k.a. Bookie. I needed y'all to hear that because That's real talk right there. I appreciate that. I'm glad that Lincoln took the opportunity to speak up for his mans, because that's my mans too. Everybody I've ever talked to about Bookie says the same thing. He is how you coach your kids to be. 100% leader. Let me see. Doc Winston Boogie saying, shout out to everyone in the chat. You guys rock. Help this channel out by smashing the like button and hit the subscribe button and ring the bell for notifications. Doc always making sure that we stay up on that, and I appreciate that, because that's how the channel grows, right? We went over 57,000 subscribers overnight, and y'all are all a part of that. I appreciate you for being here. Let me see. Bookie is like Leon O'Neal for A&M. I love Leon. Leon's cool. Like, I didn't know y'all felt that way about Leon. I like Leon. Leon was edgy toward Oklahoma there in 2018. Let me see. Randy Jackson, my bad. Let me clean that up. If OSU loses before the Big Ten championship and beats Northwestern, do they put 2 SEC teams in and 2 ACC teams in? No, because you're also taking into account whether or not the Pac-12 champ is undefeated and whether or not Cincinnati is undefeated, along with an undefeated BYU. You're not going to put a 2-loss team in there. You're just not. The Big Ten champ is going to get in. I don't think the runner-up for the Big Ten champ does not get in. Let's see. Trying to see what else we got in here. Bama boy, what you got? LSU will get hammered by the NCAA. Give it a little more time. That dude really wants him to get hammered. Let me see. What else we got in here? All right, ladies and gentlemen. I do believe that is going to do it for this live show. I always appreciate y'all for showing up to these. They're fun. I get to interact with the chat like it's callers, and it's a little bit more, well, it's a little less unruly. And one of the reasons is because Doc Winston Boogie is in there making sure that the chat stays clean for everybody. We got some rules that people are really getting on board with and starting to follow, like don't spam the chat. If you have a badge, I'm probably going to get to your question a little bit sooner than I do other questions. Don't use all caps to try to get attention. Be respectful in the chat. Don't call each other names. I appreciate that. It's a lot of fun when it interacts like this. All right. Happy Thanksgiving to all of you. And I will see y'all in like an hour. Deuces.